Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of the Midweek Wire. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. We're streaming out live on X, Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, also Facebook Live, and also on the audio streams. We'll be on there after the show, not live on iTunes, but we'll be afterwards. We'll be on all of the Spotify, all the major audio streams as well. Thank you for joining us. Important conversation today. We're going to cover this important story of the Iran nuclear crisis. And Trump has raised the ante, if you will, with threats to Iran. Obviously, Iran has reciprocated with threats of their own. So we think we're going down a very delicate and precarious path here internationally. We're going to be dispelling some of the myths, straightening out some of the arguments. I'm going to bring onto the show special guest, Freddie Ponton, who is a contributor at 21stcenturywire.com. He's a journalist, also a researcher, and he's based in France. He's giving us a different international perspective. We'll bring him onto the stage right now. Freddie is going to come on right now. Freddie, I think we've got you. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Patrick. Good to be on the show.
It's great to have you as well, Fred. And, just to kind of outline, there's a few other issues that are going to come into this discussion. Obviously, this situation in Gaza is very much connected to this discussion, no doubt about that. I'm sure you have a lot to say there. But let's bring on just the general situation right now. Here's the Times of Israel, or what some people call the Genocide Observer. This is the Israeli press. Trump threatens there will be bombing if Iran fails to make a deal on nukes. So here we go again with the deals. Fred, I don't really know where to start this discussion, but first of all, in my opinion, Fred, this is not the best way to get into any sort of negotiations by threatening to annihilate a country. Now, listen, we'll look at arguments. Scott Ritter has made very high-profile argument, basically saying that Iran needs to comply with whatever the U.S. wants. Otherwise, the U.S. is going to destroy the country. I think the words used by Scott Ritter are a war of national termination. So he says we're going to terminate the regime and the country if you don't make a deal with us. Now, I've got a lot of things to say about this, Fred, but I want to hand the ball over to you. What do you make of this? I mean, this situation, I don't think this is a good way to start negotiations. I think this is not building a casino in Atlantic City, so the art of the deal doesn't apply here. This is much deeper, isn't it? We've got a lot of potential moving parts, a lot of potential dangerous developments that could result if Trump goes through with what he's threatening. But also, we can't discount the Iranian side here. And Israel is also a key part of this. That's not really in the discussion right now. The way this is framed, Fred, I have a lot of things to say about this, but I want to hand it over to you first to get some opening comments. Go ahead.
Yes, Patrick. Well, thank you very much for having me. I think it's a very confusing period for everyone at this moment in time. Very few people really really understand, even in the United States, what's going on. Nothing is making sense. So everything and everyone seems to go along with the program, if you will, and repeat what the others are saying without actually taking the time to analyze exactly what is going on. And I think that's really what's interesting for all of us, is trying to dig a little bit further and trying to look at a bigger picture here. And I've heard Scott Ritter comments about, his positions with regards to Iran being at fault for entertaining the possibility of defending themselves and raising of course, the stakes here by acquiring or being on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons. So as I said again, I think we all love Scott Ritter. There's no problem with Scott as a man. He's a genuine man. He's a Marine. He's very passionate about what he describes, and we can't hold that against him. So we're not judging on the surface. I think we can't do that. First of all, I think it will be stupid to do that. But also, it is okay to disagree to a certain degree, and simply because we're not American. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not American, and I'm looking at what America has offered us for the past 50 years.
But it does affect you. This situation does affect you and everybody else.
That's right.
Yeah, and also, I'm not going to let you off the hook, Fred, because France is responsible for giving Israel the nuclear capabilities as well as the U.S. Although they stole it from us, you guys helped them. But we covered that last week in depth on this.
Yes, absolutely. But it's a good point. It's a good story.
Pretty good, didn't we? So
yeah. We did. There is a mea culpa. There's a mea culpa.
You've got an interest in this story as well as me politically. So France is deeply, deeply intertwined in this story historically, the Israeli nuclear program. So I think I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah.
Yes, it's a fair point. Absolutely. We described that, and we went deep last time on it, and it's really doesn't matter today. As I said, what the conclusions that we arrived is that we need to take responsibility for what we're doing now, because it might impact our grandchildren, grandchildren's later on, and they will have to deal with this mess. So this is not something we just can look away and say, oh, it was 60, 70 years ago, who cares? No, we should care about that, learn the lesson that need to be learned, and making sure they do not happen again, so that no one has to make decisions on whether we are going to a World War III, or whether we can find the intelligence and the right words and the right tools to bring everyone to the table and bring peace to the region. So again, this is a very complex region, because the arms race in the region was something that was largely prohibited by the Kennedy administrations and the brothers, despite the fact that Robert Kennedy was described as a kind of a supporter of Israel, which I never agreed with. I think everyone understands that when you're going and you're racing for as a presidential candidate, you're going to have to please everyone, and there must be in your speech everything to please everyone, according the people and the support of Israel, even though at the time it was the Zionist organization, today the AIPAC. It still at the time was very prevalent, and they had a lot of influence in the US administration and its foreign policies. So again, what matters today is what we have in our hand to deal with. What are the cards that can be played? Now, first, before doing that, is to understand the context. And the context for me, it's really about the reshaping of the great economics of the world here. Before uranium, before nuclear, there's a bigger picture. And that is basically the controls of major trading corridors in these particular areas. A lot of people have, a lot of countries and powers have big stakes in this race, namely China, namely India, namely Russia. And then, of course, Iran is at the confluence. It's really the crossroads for these major trade corridors, if you will. And I think, personally, this is what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is that the idea of nuclear and blaming Iran for trying to, open options for themselves to defend themselves, if you will, is being used against them, as far as justifying the pressure that is put on them. Because at the end of the day, we all have witnessed the expansions of Israel, this Israeli hegemony, as people call it, across the region. And it seems that Netanyahu is thriving on this for his own political survival, I suppose. I mean, the country is in mess. We can see the Orthodox been on the street fighting the police. And many people on the left side as well seems that, start to understand that this man is not in there for Israel, but is in there for himself. So all that add to the, I would say, to the fire and the cauldron that this region has become, if you will. And to put an end to it, there is different ways to do that. And unfortunately today, because there is little resistance within the US administrations, very little resistance from the European administrations as well. It's all the same. Everybody's kind of trying to stay a little bit away from it and letting the US, take the role as the deal breaker. The problem is the big question is there actually a deal that can be broken? Right. We saw basically an exchange of courier of letters between Trump and the presidency in Iran. They've already replied. They've already expressed that, we're happy to talk, but not directly, simply because they don't trust the United States. And I think we can all understand why. I think US has been mingling way too much in this region for way too long, especially with Iran. So I think they've learned from their experience dealing with the US, and they just simply don't want to be another failed states, simply because they've trusted the United States. So I mean, good on them. There's no reason to trust the United States at this moment in time. All they need to do is to have a good, strong mediators. And Oman has always been described as a place where you can strike the impossible deal. So I guess that was a good pick. Let's see what's going to come out of that. But right now, as I said, there is really two major issues. One is the right to defend yourself. This is about international law. This is about making sure that if one rule or one international rule applies to one country, it applies to the next. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what needs to be addressed. We saw Iran today picking up the phone and speaking with the Secretary General of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, simply because there must be a clear pictures, as far as what Iran stands for, where does it want to go with this, and what does it mean for the international community. And the conversations are very straightforward as far as Iran is concerned. On 2018, Trump moved away, literally got off the boat of the GPOCA. Sorry, I can't ever say it, so forget me about that. JCPOA, there you go, got it, JCPOA. Thanks for your help. And yes, and basically wants to go back on that particular train, but what will be the conditions, And I think you've expressed that in some of your tweets. Many people have expressed it. I've expressed it myself as well in recent posts. And it's really about simple fairness, about, well, if we're going to force Iran to open the window, open the doors to inspectors, and because they're already on the NPT anyway. So it's really about, transparency, and the transparency should apply to Israel. That's bottom line. That is the bottom line. If we're going to talk about the Iran nuclear program, we need to talk about the Israeli nuclear program, which has really gone unchecked, properly unchecked, really, for the past 50 years. I mean, this is unbelievable. We have a small country, small, just above 2 million inhabitants. What do they need so many nuclear weapons? I understand the idea when they arrived, the preliminary idea of saying, well, the Holocaust, all things, they came out, they said, what, never again, let's protect ourselves. I can understand that. Some of it, I can understand it, because at the end of the day, we're human, and you're going through a crisis, you're going for something that's really scars, your family, your tribe, if you will, for generations. You won't forget that. So you move into a region, you're going to want to very quickly assert yourself and making sure nobody's going to take that away from you, or nobody's going to be able to come and abuse you. So I understand that. But if you're doing it the right way, and if you want to do it for the right reason, surely there should not be any reason for this particular dialogue to be open with the right institution like the IAEA, the United Nations Security Council. All these debates are not taking place. And that is a major problem, because this kind of strategy of ambiguity, which is what Animate is all about, this Israeli nuclear strategy, is not actually producing the effect that is attended. It's actually creating more tensions, and it's inviting other countries to say, well, if they can do it, we can do it as well. So that's the essence of the problem that we are facing at the moment. And the Trump administration is going after Iran and say, well, you got to do that, but then never address the Israeli nuclear program. That's just simply basically kill the debate. And I understand what Iran is now saying. Look, you can't be trusted. We saw what you've done in Gaza. This is sponsored by the United States. There is a complete hegemony that is going on, where Israel is going to so many different countries, wreaking havoc Why on earth should we want to just listen to you? So you give us a good reason for that. Let's go back to the discussion if you want, but I can already imagine what the Iranians are going to tell the Americans. If you want to come and fight us, we're there, we're ready. And anybody that knows Iranian people will know that these are not people that's, there's a very old civilization. It's ingrained in them, and they will fight it. They will fight it. There's no doubt about it. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to see population and civilian being killed. But what it is, do they have to bend the knee, Patrick? Do they have to say, well, okay, we're going to trust you one more time? Well, what's the options for the Iranians, really? Because addressing it as a reality that the United States is going to crush Iran, it's a lot of assumptions, in my view. It's making a lot of assumptions because we have no idea of, first of all, the technology transfer that has occurred between China and Iran and Russia and Iran. How much technology has been incubated in Iran? They are very capable people. They've proved them. They have their own defense program. They have their own nuclear program, clearly. These are not people that just don't know. These are not, it's not Iraq 30, 40 years ago. It's not the same country. This is a country that has planned for this attack all their life. So we don't want to see that. I'm sure you don't want to see that as well. But the bottom line is that they are prepared. They're clearly sending the message that they are prepared, and there will be repercussions should the Trump administration decide to attack. And then the rest, of course, is to address the capabilities. I actually posted a very interesting article this morning by Colonel Gary Anderson about his vision about how the Navy and the Marine Corps are actually geared up for ground invasion and amphibious deployments, on the beach of Yemen or Iran. You need material, you need a lot of things to do that. And based on the current policies, which seems to be completely blinded from what they should be doing, I don't think that right now the military is capable of doing any of those. I mean, they can't even chew anything that that Yemen has to offer. I mean, when you go after Iran, you're going after a complete different animal. And airstrike is one thing, and some people, there's different school in that, Patrick. Some people believe in this kind of a bombing and strategic bombing and the effect and how you can win war with that. Other, like myself, think that this is not the way you win war, not actually in this kind of fifth generation warfare.
Yeah, well, we'll talk a little bit about that tactical side maybe in a bit, but the main point is, if Iran retaliates against a U.S. preemptive strike, and that preemptive strike most certainly will include, based on Trump's own nuclear doctrine, revised doctrine, will include low-yield tactical nuclear weapons, ground-penetrating, low-yield nuclear bunker busters. So that's a preemptive nuclear strike against Iran. This will have a military cost for the U.S. in terms of all of its bases in the region, but it will also have a political cost to the United States, both internationally and at home. Okay, so that's part of the calculus that the Trump administration most certainly will make. But I think some of the analysts who are a little bit gung-ho on this hyper offensive realist argument might have overlooked. And that is definitely part of the calculus. Now, here's Iran. This is the senior advisor of the supreme leader. We were the first to break this on X Spaces the other night. We said this is the senior advisor. So, like, basically saying, we'll bring the quote up on screen here. Iran will have no choice but to get nukes if attacked, says senior advisor. Ali Nadejani says, we are not moving towards nuclear weapons, but if you do something wrong in the Iranian nuclear issue, you will force Iran to move towards that because it has to defend itself, says the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei's senior advisor, Ali Larijani, told Iranian state TV. So that's a big statement. Obviously, he's talking about reversing the current fatwa that is in place, which prohibits the building and deployment or just having nuclear weapons, not deploying them, just having them. It's prohibited at the moment in the Islamic Republic. But what Trump is doing by these threats is basically trying to fast track Iran's, nuclear arsenal. I mean, it's the opposite effect, but this is what you get with Yemen as well. Like everything that Trump is doing accelerates the problem rather than lessens it. Now, maybe somehow is this some genius 5D chess move by Trump to denuclearize the region? I don't know, and I don't think it is. But let's hear from Mohammed Marandi. He is an Iranian professor at the University of Tehran. We're going to bring him up on stage right now. Now, we'll hear from Marandi first. I've got a clip from India and the Global Left YouTube channel here, and then we'll hear from Marandi first. Then we'll hear a little bit of what Ritter is saying. So we'll bring this up on screen right now. And so it's important to note here, and obviously we're doing a syndication from the YouTube channel of India and the Global Left, which actually has some good content on it. I've been on his program a few times. He's an interesting chap. But here's Marandi. So we'll listen to this for a moment and see what the Iranian perspective is on this.
What do you think would be the future of the Iranian nuclear principles and programs? Because the recent intelligence community report on Senate says that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. The 2003 abandonment of its nuclear programs are still on, and it refers to the Supreme Leader Khomeini's fatwa. But if this continues, what is the future of Iranian nuclear program?
There are a couple of things here. One is that the United States admits that since 2003, as you rightly point out, that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons. I would add that before 2003, Iran was never pursuing nuclear weapons. That's just a fact. But in any case, at least there's an agreement that for the last 22 years, Iran has not been pursuing nuclear weapons. So the threats being made against Iran are violations of international law. Not just any attack. An attack would be a clear act of aggression, but threats against Iran are violations of international law. Iran's nuclear program is the country's right. Before the revolution, the nuclear program had been initiated with Western support. But since Iran is now a sovereign and independent country, and it's no longer a client regime like the other regimes in the region, the West has determined that Iran should not have a peaceful nuclear program. Iran simply will not accept that. Nuclear energy for Iran is important. Iran right now produces electricity. Iran produces medicine. It uses nuclear energy in different fields. And it wants to be able to make sure that it can produce its own enriched uranium in case supplies are cut off at some point. We're a country where the United States imposes maximum pressure sanctions. Iran wants to be doesn't want to be vulnerable. It wants to be as well protected as possible. But then, of course, there's the other issue, and that is Iran is the threshold state, and that is, I think, linked to the fact that the Israeli regime has nuclear weapons, and the United States has threatened Iran with nuclear weapons before. Hillary Clinton once threatened Iran with nuclear weapons. And the Israeli regime, just during the genocide, one of their government ministers threatened Gaza with a nuclear weapon. So when you have such sinister actors, meaning the regime in Washington and the regime in Tel Aviv, the Iranians obviously will want to keep an eye on their national. They want to be very careful about their national security. And so an advisor to the leader, Dr. Kharazi, said, I think 3 times maybe over the last year or so, or year and a half or so, that if there's an imminent or threat to Iran's existence, or an existential threat to Iran, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. then Iran will reconsider its nuclear posture. And Iran's nuclear program is very developed. It's one of the top 10 most developed nuclear programs in the world. Iran's missile defense capabilities, Iran's missile capabilities in general are among the best in the world. So the Iranians they're not foolish. They know that when the United States is threatening the country and the future of the country, the very existence of the country, or the Israelis are doing the same. Remember, these are genocidal regimes that wipe out nations. I don't know if you saw the exchanges in the Signal group where Vice President Vance, when he was told that a civilian building collapsed, killing everyone inside, he said, great, something like that in Yemen. The interesting thing, of course, is that they didn't kill any of the top leaders, contrary to what they thought they did or they claimed that they did. None of the senior military or political figures of Ansarullah and the Yemeni government have been killed or martyred in these airstrikes, contrary to what the Americans are saying. But they destroy a civilian building, murdering everyone inside, and then they celebrate. These are the sinister monsters that Iran is dealing with. So obviously, while Iran's nuclear program is peaceful, but the Iranians are very careful about the intentions, the actions, and the behavior of Washington and Tel Aviv.
So, Fred, I mean, important. We'll hear from Scott Ritter in a moment, but an important part of that, he said Iran is a nuclear threshold state. So this is a way of describing Iran as a threshold state, meaning it doesn't have weapons, but it has the potential to quickly assemble weapons on very short notice, maybe weeks, maybe months. But so they have the ability to do that. Now, they're not the only nuclear threshold state. Important point. So they're not the only one, but they are the one currently in the crosshairs of the United States, of Washington. So that's an important point. And so they reserve the right to, if they want to cross that threshold, you know, if they're being threatened, you know, they're well within their rights, no matter if they're an NPC signatory or NPT signatory, non-proliferation treaty, nuclear signatory or not. It doesn't matter at that point. If you're being threatened by another nuclear power, you know, the non-proliferation treaty goes out the window because states aren't supposed to be threatening each other. You're supposed to negotiate. Unfortunately, Iran already negotiated with the US, Europe, and Russia and everybody. The P5+1 created the JCPOA, but Trump himself tore it up on the orders of Netanyahu in May of 2018. Mike Pompeo was the Secretary of State. He did the dirty on that, and that was an order from Israel to Trump to to pull the US out of the deal. Has that helped for peace in the region? Has that brought the region closer to war, or did it make it safer? Of course, we know what the answer to that is. So, any comments? I've got Ritter coming in a minute, but any comments on anything Mohammed Marandi said there from Tehran?
Well, I mean, Professor Marandi is absolutely correct. You know, the adult in the room here has been Iran all along. I mean, and as I said, this is how you judge basically a government, by his actions. And what we've seen over the last past 2.5 years is, despite the many attacks, the attacks on their embassies in Damascus, and many different problems that have occurred in the regions over the past few years, Iran has always kept the dialogue open, if you will, and they've never hidden that they were not interested, as you said, before 2013. They were never interested in weaponizing their nuclear program because it goes against the fatwa. But I think Iran has also has looked at many countries like Syria, especially like Libya, you know, which was a very prosperous countries which could have acquired the nuclear weapon and the nuclear facilities and so on. And look what happened to them when they had no means to defend themselves. So this has to wait into the equations. And I think that's what Professor Marandi is describing here. They have the right to defend themselves, because simply today's in the world we're living, it's quite clear that powers like the United States couldn't care less about international law or humanitarian international law. We've seen that for years. Look at Gaza. I mean, if you sponsor a state like Israel, which is clearly committing a crime against humanity, that says your answer is there. There's nothing else, to ask or to try to find out. You have a rogue states supporting another rogue states, and yet these are these rogue states asking a state that is just trying to get to the bottom of it and asking, say, stop killing our people. If you come to the region, behave as as anyone else has behaved for the last 50 years. But if you're going to keep on doing what you do, what's going to happen is Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia was already talking about matching the Iranian nuclear program. So this is going to be a snowball effect. And we are far away from, disarming the Middle East in a way and keeping this place away from nuclear weapon, and hopefully the world without nuclear weapon. But that's what he's saying. He said right now there are threats against the countries, and we are afraid because we have this ability very quickly to upgrade to positions where we can defend ourselves. And this is the right of any sovereign state, is to defend yourself, because at the end of the day, if they feel under attack by a major power, a nuclear power, surely they're going to want to compete on the same level. And more importantly, making sure that, this is going to be repercussions, So they've outlined it. What I'm really amazed about the Iranian is that they're not trying to hide. I tell you, we want you to stop the killing. We want Palestine to have a state, get out of Lebanon, get out of the Golden Heights, get out of Syria, get out of all the places you've conquered, and the West Bank, of course. And then from that, when we have Gaza, we have a free Palestinian state, which I think they're entitled to, according to international law, according to the United Nations, hundreds of resolutions. What more? I mean, they've not been unreasonable. I don't see where they've been unreasonable. But as I said, the hegemony, whether it's the United States, whether it's Israeli hegemony, is really a big part of what is basically fueling this warmongering. And then you have a complete U.S. administrations at the service of Israel. I don't see any dissenting voice in the Congress or in the House. That is, everybody's speaking from the same tone, So it's that. But again, what's important, and as I say, and I really emphasize on that, this has to do about, it's the results, if you will, of aggressive neo-mercantilism. This is really, since 2018, it's gone to a level that is, of course, very dangerous for the world, because neo-mercantilism, although it promotes, maybe allegedly creation of jobs and prosperity, and it's a bit of a kind of a sovereign attitude, more nationalist attitude towards trade, but also separating big blocks, instead of having something very homogeneous in terms of trading platforms around the world where people can do business and everybody's considered alike. What you do when you're aggressive, when you insert national security interests in your way, in your global trade, you create the tensions that we are seeing in the southeast, in the southern east sea, the Chinese Sea, and then of course further down in the Gulf, in the Middle East. This is the result of trade policy that have increased the tension in this region to place Israel as the center of a commercial and a trade corridor, and that has serious repercussions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll hold that thought for a moment. That's more on the sort of the geostrategic picture. We'll get there eventually, but let's hear what Scott Ritter. This isn't a rebuttal within a debate. This is a separate interview he did with the same channel, which is India and the Global Left, and this is Scott outlining some of his kind of argument on this. So we'll listen to this one.
Have you seen this?
Hold on for a second. Unfortunately, we're streaming off of a YouTube video, so we have to bear with the ad pre-roll there. But here he is, Scott Ritter.
Just start by saying that I disagree with your premise altogether. I mean, first of all, I I'm 100% against nuclear weapons. I'm a big nuclear zero guy. I'm a nuclear arms control guy. I actually got rid of nuclear weapons back in the day. So what I'm about to say is not reflective of how I would like the world to be, but as the world is. And I will have a hard time standing by. I don't blame you on this, but are you telling me right now that India doesn't have a nuclear preemption of attack plan option out for Pakistan?
India
if they-
doesn't have a first strike doctrine.
You're
India
telling
and
me
China.
that Pakistan was loading up nuclear weapons and saying that they're going to fire them against India, that India will absorb Pakistan's attack without carrying out any preemption?
I don't know that, but India,
Right, you don't
India
know that.
maintains.
I
yeah.
will tell you right now that India has a preemptive strike. You don't have nuclear weapons. You don't have the weapon systems that India has. And Pakistan has a first strike policy too. It's not declared, it's not announced, but if Pakistan saw India putting its nuclear forces on full alert, making preparations, the intelligence where India's going to launch tomorrow.
But Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. That's the difference.
Just a second. You're getting ahead of myself.
Okay.
Ahead.
That's what
Don't
the
do that.
intelligence committee in the Senate suggested recently.
No, they didn't suggest. I'll tell you exactly what they said because I know what they said. I'm intimately familiar with this problem. All right. But I'm just starting off with the notion that if the United States did something, the whole world would be against it. There would be backlash, but not as much as you think. And now I'm going to tell you why. Because Iran is not allowed to have nuclear weapons. Now you're going to say, but Scott, didn't the National Threat Assessment recently briefed by Tulsi Gabbard's Department or Director of National Intelligence, the United States Senate, make this case? What they said is this: that there is no evidence that Iran is assembling a nuclear weapon or pursuing the assembly of a nuclear weapon. And there's no evidence that the Iranian leadership has given orders for such a weapon to be assembled. Do we concur that's what they said?
Yes.
Okay. So now I've been saying that forever. I agree with that statement. I think everybody agrees. The Iranians agree with that statement. But that's not the issue. Let's get back to why the JCPOA was negotiated. Okay? Before we get into the whole viability of the JCPOA. The purpose of the JCPOA was to create a 1-year breakout window so that if Iran decided to violate the terms of the JCPOA and kick out inspectors, that the international community will have 1 year to respond before Iran could build a nuclear weapon. That 1 year was deemed to be the acceptable window. I just want to remind everybody, because we go back to the JCPO, go back to the JCPO. 1 year window, guys, breakout window, 1 year. Iran today is literally 1 week. 1 week. That is unacceptable.
Okay, Fred. Let's just try. I'll put pause there, and we'll try to deconstruct some of this here, and also have to correct Scott on a couple of things. I mean, it's not that he's technically wrong, but it's how he is framing the discussion, how he's framing the picture there. And the purpose of the JCPOA wasn't to make sure that Iran had a 1-year breakout. Of course, that's a feature of the JCPOA. That's not the purpose. The purpose was to have an international agreement guaranteed by the other world powers that was sufficient enough to allay the concerns of the United States, aka Israel, that Iran had or was pursuing nuclear weapons. Full international transparency and oversight. And then the quid pro quo was to lift sanctions on Iran so that it could resume normal economic activity instead of the collective punishment regime which the United States is currently enforcing and some of their partners are enforcing on Iran, which is illegal and completely in violation of all international norms. But let's put that aside because the U.S. is allowed to sanction people unilaterally, even though no other country is allowed to do it. The U.S. is allowed to do it. So we'll give Scott a very wide berth on that argument, extremely wide berth. And Scott Ritter says Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Well, I guess Israel can, you see. NUMEC. Great story there, how Israel stole the bomb from the US. Okay. So why is Israel allowed to have nuclear weapons, but Iran, this is a major red line. Oh my God, Iran can't have nuclear weapons. It's interesting that Scott evokes the Pakistan-India issue, right? Have India and Pakistan, they've had nuclear weapons for a long time? Have they attacked each other? No. Are they likely to attack each other in a nuclear way? Absolutely not. It all modeling on game theory shows they will not. They will not. Okay. So this brings us to my solution. I'm preempting this because this is Pat's peace plan. Okay. Pat's peace plan. We'll go back to Scott Ritter, but seeing that we're on the topic here. So Pat's peace plan, let's take a look at that. What is that going to look like here? I'll remove Mr. Ritter for the moment, and we'll add the peace plan, which I'll bring up on X right now. So this is my solution. It's very simple and quite elegant, depending on what your international worldview is. So I'm saying this is a possible solution to the Iran nuclear dilemma, and this is what I propose, Freddie. I want to get your comments, criticisms, or whatever. I'm open to suggestions, of course. But so I'm saying that, given that Trump has raised the ante, he wants to renegotiate the JCPOA. So Trump wants the JCPOA with the Trump stamp on it, sort of like a Trump stamp on it. And ironically, this is the deal that Trump tore up. No credibility whatsoever. So this is a kind of a dead letter. Again, this is another fundamental problem with Scott Ritter's argument, is that he's discounting the fact that Iran has no motivation or doesn't trust the United States. Not only that, Scott's the weapons inspector who was intimately involved in the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction scenario, Fred. So Saddam Hussein in Iraq allowed weapons inspectors in. They found nothing, no WMDs, nothing. And what did the U.S. do? They bombed them and they occupied them and invaded them and killed 1.5 million people, something like that. So that's the next door neighbor of Iran. So they're looking at the United States and thinking, can we trust these guys? Well, not really. They pulled out of the JCPOA. They stabbed Iraq in the back, lied to them, destroyed the country, destroyed the region over WMD allegations where there was zero evidence. We're back in 2002 again. It's like Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox, Middle East edition. Okay, so my solution, Freddie, here is that seeing that Israel has a whole arsenal of undeclared nuclear weapons. Okay, meanwhile, Israel maintains an undeclared nuclear arsenal of 200 plus warheads, which they don't allow the International Atomic Energy Agency or any regulators or inspectors to look at or see. So they're allowed to have a secret nuclear arsenal, Israel. That's okay for the U.S. That's fine. But Iran can't have nuclear weapons. So even though Iran doesn't have them, the U.S. is going to hit them preemptively with nuclear weapons because they won't come to the table to sign a deal with the U.S., the same deal the U.S. tore up under the first Trump administration. This is total madness, okay? So what's the solution? The solution is this. If you want Iran to come to the table, I say another JCPOA agreement, another P5+1, but the difference here, Freddie, is this time, not only is Iran coming under inspection, transparency, and supervision, but Israel comes as well. Israel should be required to give full transparency to the world about its nuclear weapons program and open up to inspections, the same inspections that this man asked for in 1963. That man, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was killed shortly after demanding that Israel submit to non-proliferation arrangements with the international community. Of course, that didn't happen. He was then killed, and the rest is history. Israel's been allowed to have an unsupervised nuclear weapons program, domestic nuclear program, without any oversight. So all we're suggesting here, Fred, is that we have this JCPOA agreement, but we add Israel to the agreement. And naturally, you know what that means. Once this happens, Israel is going to have to disarm. If you want a nuclear-free Middle East, that means either Israel and Iran both relinquish any nuclear weapons or ambitions, okay? Either that or, Fred, and I put this in my suggestion here, or they both have them. They both have them. And the Pakistan nuclear situation has created a power balance offset where both countries have declared their nuclear weapons, and it's given relative stability to the issue. So both are possible. Either both countries give up nuclear weapons, Israel and Iran. Okay, this isn't about the U.S. Scott Ritter admits the Iranians don't threaten the U.S. He admits it. So what is this about? It's not about American security. It's about Israeli security. But it's not about Israeli security. It's about Israeli dominance in the region. So if they both have them, I think that'll work. They both have nukes, Israel and Iran. But I think the people in the region, if they were to vote, Fred, I would say that most people in the region, I put this detail in here, are going to vote no on nuclear weapons. And they want a nuclear-free region. And that includes the United States will have to remove its nukes from Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey and any other nuclear weapons. Why, Fred? Because I don't know about you, but I checked my calendar, and the Cold War ended 35 years ago. So why does the U.S. have to have nuclear weapons in 20 different places in Asia and also in the Indian Ocean, at Diego Garcia, in Turkey, right up on everyone else's grill, basically? So that's my peace plan, Freddie. So I will give you the floor to add comment, additions, critiques, counter arguments. Go ahead.
Yes, I think your proposal is extremely well articulated. I mean, it's really, as far as I'm concerned, expressing only two options here, as you just said. This is one option, as you said, where Israel disarm, and obviously, naturally, Iran will feel the same way. Feel there's no need, there's no more nuclear threat coming from the region, and for all the monarchy around in the Gulf region should support this idea, because you don't want any nuclear weapon at all. That's the ideal scenario, and that's how things normally. This is where countries are able to deal on the same level. Israel will have no possibility of threatening Iran, and Iran will have absolutely zero interest in threatening Israel, because if the sanctions are lifted, and if that is the reason why primarily Iran has been kept under sanctions and for supporting basically the resistance to Israel's bullying in the region because of his nuclear power program and the weaponization of it. If everything goes away, Israel is left with absolutely zero pressures on its neighbors. It'll just have to live like everybody else in peace and trying to be cordial with its neighbors and the rest of the world. And can Israel live with that? From what I've seen so far, I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think that Israel is, as far as I'm concerned, is on the verge of imploding because too much fanatism, too much ideology, and as I said, the greater Israel project has to go through killing of millions of people. There's no other way to do it. There's no way they can do the greater Israel unless they're going to kill more people. So the promise of the greater Israel is more death in the region. And that is the reason why today, if we're going to look at that in a very rational way, can Israel be allowed to have a nuclear weapon for much longer? The answer is no. And as I said, the NPT and the GCPOA, if it is to be renewed, it has to imply that Israel has to have some full transparency about his program. It's going to be embarrassing because there's more than just nuclear bomb in there. I can tell you, I've researched it very well. I've got papers from France, really, really high level confirmation, hydrogen bomb, nutrient bombs, you name it. They have it all. And we're not even talking about the biological warfare program that they have in Israel.
And the doctrine, Freddie, the doctrine, which is the Samson option.
And the Samson option.
Which is if they feel threatened, they will blow up the world. And they'll hit Europe and they'll hit everybody. Their attitude is, well, if we can't have it, nobody can have it. Yeah. This land, the Holy Land, and we're going to destroy the entire world. I mean, how satanic and evil is that type of a crazy psychopathic doctrine?
Well, it's well encapsulated in the Hannibal doctrines. They have no problem shooting their own civilians because the price to pay for exchanging prisoners is just too high to pay. So rather kill our own people.
Ruthless.
You don't want to, it's ruthless, and it's, of course, nobody wants to be in that situation, but it's still ruthless, and we still have a lot of explanations that needs to be brought to the surface as far as what happened to October the 7th. Nobody denied that it happened, but how it happened, what really, happened, what really happened that day, it's very important that everything and all the transparency is brought to that. Was there pre-knowledge, all that kind of things needs to be, because it's about trust at the end of the day. And I think that's what is expressed across all these discussions, whether it's, in Ukraine or whether it's in with Israel, is can we trust the other guy? Putin has the same problem, Iran has the same problem. And it seems that Israel and the United States is kind of running out of trust, if you will. Their trust credit has been expunged and there's nothing left. So it forces other nations which have to face the hegemony to consider their options. And that's exactly what Professor Marandi was articulating. And I think that's what Scott Ritter is trying to say, but it's just framing it so badly that it's really look at it that, bend the knees, to save your population. That is, for me, for someone that has spent so much time in this part of the world, I'm surprised of him even expressing this idea. It's just simply not a concept in the Iranian mentality or even in the Arab mentality. They will trade, they'll do everything they can, but telling them to bend the knees because we are coming for you, they'll fight it. They'll fight it just for the sake of it, But what happened with Israel and all this, this cataclysm, this catastrophe, this Nakba 2.0, and even worse, no, it's not negotiable. I don't think it's negotiable. And I think what we are saying is a dog that is barking out of the United States with a warmongering neocon Zionist in this administration that just wants to see Iran gone. Completely gone out of the map, so that they can come and build on top of it, on top of such an old civilization and such a sophisticated civilization. It's unbelievable that this is happening live, and we get to witness this incredible turn of events. And I hope that someone, and I always say, if you're going to see some reality, some true reality, perhaps not Scott Ritter reality as he describes it, but a true reality sometimes comes from the military. So we might see a lot of discussions amongst the politics, that probably never seen war, maybe a couple of weeks. But deep inside the Pentagon, I would like to believe that there are still some reasonable people that is going to really address the real military issue that the US is actually facing, not only against the Houthis on Sahel, but also against Iran, because that kind of war has got serious consequences, and the preparedness for that is unbelievable. The level of logistics, the preparedness, and the integrations of new doctrines, because the warfare and the tactical warfare has changed drastically. Everything has changed. You're dealing with small countries like Yemen that has you know.
So a lot has changed, but game theory is still the same. Nuclear deterrence, nuclear retaliation, counterstrikes, calculations, that hasn't changed very much. Unfortunately, the defense secretary with people like this, Pete Hegseth, who's a 44-year-old Fox News weekend host, here he is with putting the battle plans for the strike on Yemen on his signal chat with all the other ne'er-do-wells in the Trump cabinet. And here's Hegseth. We're currently clean on OPSEC. No, you're not. The whole chat got leaked, you fool. But that's the Secretary of Defense. It's kind of a joke. I know we joke about this, but it is kind of serious because he's not really going to help or be able to contribute anything of value to this type of a situation that's way above his head, his pay grade, and his intellectual capacity. Unfortunately, this is where the realm of experience comes into play. Now, just a note on game theory, okay? Basic game theory. So for me, I did a postgraduate in international relations, so that was required reading for me, okay? I had to learn this for negotiations theory, but also for sanctions theory, okay? Now, if you threaten the counterparty, the one you're targeting, with collective punishment or violence, the level of chance that you're going to get them to comply with whatever you're proposing goes down to almost zero.
Yep.
And that's every case study in history, plus all the theoretical modeling. I have a book on it sitting behind me on my bookshelf. So that's the paradox of the situation. And also nuclear doctrines also factor this into play. That's why we have diplomats. That's why we have diplomacy. That's why we have mechanisms to resolve these types of disputes, not threatening people with annihilation. This is the problem with the Trump administration and his non-existent national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who's a total clown, not a serious person. None of these people are serious. Here's there's a signal chat. Yeah, emojis. Look at that. Big fist, flame emojis. Good job, Pete, and your team, says Marco Rubio there. I mean, this is such a joke. Excellent, great job. You get the top rocket guy from the Houthis, and the buildings collapsed. Good job, guys. It's like a corporate kind of stupid corporate WhatsApp group or something like that. That's kind of how they're acting. These are not serious people. Okay, these are social media, clout chasing, political celebrities masquerading as people serving their country. Who knows what their priorities are, or whether they think that this particular situation is totally going to put the United States over the edge internationally. Economically, it's going to destroy the region. And so what is the calculus here? So my point on this, Freddie, not to be too long-winded, is that it's untenable, this style of negotiations. There's no art of the deal here, okay? What you said, Freddie, is important. Trust. You can't do anything without trust. A deal's going to be made before, after, to head it off. Some political agreement is going to be the one, not the technical threats or the military. No, it's going to be resolved through an agreement after, before, after the war, before the war, to stop the war, whatever. So the trust is not there for the U.S., okay? Not only that, the Yemen situation is a good example. The reason Yemen was going to resume interdicting Israeli shipping in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits was because Israel broke the ceasefire agreement that Trump wrote in when he got inaugurated, brought peace to Gaza. No, he didn't. He greenlit Israel to basically sabotage that deal. And I think Trump and Netanyahu played a ruse. Okay, they played a ruse it wasn't a ceasefire. It was a pause. Prove me wrong, Donald Trump. It was a pause to allow Israel time to rearm. That's what it was. Disingenuous on your part and on Steve Witkoff's part by masquerading like this was a peace deal. If this was really a ceasefire deal with the Israelis, then the Trump administration and Steve Witkoff would have been raising unholy hell when Israel broke it, and then cut off food and water and medical supplies to Gaza. But they didn't. It was stumm. They didn't say a word. That shows you this was a fit up by Trump and Netanyahu. Okay, they lied to the American people, they lied to the world, and the evidence is there was no pushback, zero pushback. That tells you everything you need to know. So the Iranians are looking at that, the fact that now they're punishing the Yemenis because the Yemenis are trying to enforce the International Courts of Justice and the Genocide Convention by trying to prevent a genocide. And so the U.S. reaction is to bomb Yemen into submission for wanting to save lives in Gaza, when the U.S. is fully within their power to shut down Israel and make them abide by this ceasefire agreement, withholding arms. It's illegal for the U.S. to sell arms or to give arms to a country that's using them indiscriminately against civilian populations, and yet they're doing it. Okay, so there's no, this is to Scott Ritter and everybody else. There, you don't have a leg to stand on, not politically, not morally, not militarily, not legally, nothing. Because war is an extension of politics by other means. And the U.S. has not a leg to stand on, nothing politically, nothing. That's why this is going to fail. This is why the Trump administration is failing. They fumbled the ball in Ukraine. They dropped the ball in Gaza. They're blowing it with Iran. L. Lots of L's. You're not winning. MAG is not winning. Marco Rubio is a disaster. He's hiding at the moment in Guyana or something like that. He ran away. He's hiding. He can't handle it because it's one L after another. You're going to lose so much you get tired of losing, said Trump. No, tired of winning. No, you're losing. So I don't know. I mean, I get really fired up over this stuff, Freddie, because I can't believe how bad this looks.
It is bad. It's amateur time. There's no real, you don't run a government like you run a company, and that is the problem. There's too many company men, too many corporate CEOs, too many executives trying to run a country like they will run their own company. It just simply doesn't work that way. It's been proven to not work. And again, you need to bring the brain back into the Congress, back into the House. We need to bring back, people from different walk of life, but with a common denominator, which is a level of IQ and intellectualism that allows basically a coherent debate, something that when we want to negotiate, for example, a ceasefire, we don't send, people that simply don't really have the tools nor the knowledge or expertise to negotiate such a deal. It's complex. Ceasefire is a very complex process. And there are experts, in America, in Europe, that are basically, and within the United Nations, that are absolutely, and have dedicated their life to this process. But we send people, CEOs and corporate guys. This deal was broken before even Witkoff there. That's the secret of it. Witkoff didn't broke anything. There was a complete media thrill about how Witkoff was a great diplomat. Really?
Yeah.
We saw how he did in Russia. He did great. That's when you meet diplomacy.
Great
and
job.
you get a lesson. Well done, mate. Now you can go piss off. But the reality of that is that nothing that is presented to us it's Walt Disney, it's social media, it's marketing, it's PR. Look at this whole show. You ask questions during the press conference with this new press conference girl. The whole thing is ridiculous. She doesn't even answer the question. First thing she say, well, Israel, cannot be, you can't touch Israel and don't do Israel. What was the question? It doesn't matter.
Israel has a right to defend
Israel
itself.
has a right to defend itself.
And we're very concerned about the anti-Semitism on campuses in America. That's all they have.
That was the one. That was anti-Semitism. Another ADL nonsense. Everybody's on the payroll, if you will. So my concern is that it happens in France a long time ago. We've been under this pressure for such a long time. You're experimenting firsthand. You voted for someone that has promised you peace. And if you want peace, last time I checked, you don't tell the guys, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to bomb the hell out of you. It's not the way things are done. This is not how you actually build, because peace is a building process. You build it, and you build it with the main ingredient, and that is trust.
Yes.
And because you're lacking of it, you can't build it.
How do you
And
get
that's your problem. How you get it. And then you're going to blame Iran for building his own defenses when the real block that are necessary, you know, the elements that are required are not in place. You can't ask someone to do something you can't even do yourself. I mean, does the United States trust itself?
I'll bring this up on screen. You gave us this story before the show, Freddie. I mean, this kind of thing is horrific. This does not build trust. Look at this. Gaza Civil Defense confirms rescue workers bound, executed, and buried in mass graves by the Israeli occupation forces. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we have been lambasting the Nazis for the last 80 years in all of our documentaries, history books, and retrospectives, this type of behavior, okay? This is absolutely savage. And this is happening on a daily basis. They're discovering these things, or there's medical workers have been assassinated this week. Journalists have been assassinated by the Israelis. This is why you can't really have negotiations if the U.S. is endorsing this type of behavior, these types of war crimes. The war crimes are piling up so fast, Freddie. They don't have enough people to process all of the additions to the case that's already filed against Israel. They can't process all of the war crimes details. This never happened in history. Never happened in history. And yet, nothing but this coming from Washington. Trump threatening Iran, if they don't make a deal with us, we're going to bomb you into, kingdom come, into the Stone Age. I mean, and that's the response.
Look, Patrick, this incident in, I think it's in Tan al-Sultan, which is basically in the southern part at the Rafah border, the Egyptian borders. It's just an unbelievable story. I mean, it's simply after a ceasefire to find the degree of violence which aid workers were subjected to, because clearly this is an ambush. I mean, they found the bodies buried 200 meters from where the ambulance and the fire engine were ambushed. And the details in this article are so gruesome. It's just really, really hard to read, when you have people that have been decapitated, dismembered, hand tied, feet tied. You get basically the least of amount of bullets in one of the bodies, 20 bullets. They've been shot in the head. They've been shot in the chest. These people have been murdered. It's murdered, right? It's an execution. And after that is allowed to happen, it's clearly a level of criminality that needs to be addressed by the international community and the body that claims that they are here to defend human rights around the world. If you are defending human rights around the world, what you have in front of you is basically something that is part of a genocide. Although genocide is not just about body count, there's actually nothing to do with it, but it's really in line of exterminations. It's about ethnic cleansing. All right. And I think, and I've always said it, the United States and any countries that has not basically done their best to stop Israel in their process of, ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. And now we know they want to chop them out of their own country, their own land, ancestral lands. Then there's nothing more to describe. The genocide is there. You had a siege, it's a genocide. Extermination, ethnic cleansing, starvations of population. This is genocide. You want to call it another word, fine. But in law, it's genocide, period. The ICC, we are supposed to listen. I don't know how this guy is still on the media, even on the United States media. Netanyahu is wanted. Since when, as a normal democratic state, you give a voice to someone like this, to this monster? How is this possible to do that? And for me, it's like, I just don't know. I think at a moment in time, people get fed up and they start to believe any story, anything that you say. And that's exactly what happened to Iran. They don't trust anymore. And I think the Russians are probably just right behind them. And the Houthis, they have never trusted them anyway, because they've been at war with Saudis and thanks to the United States for such a long time that there was never trust building. They don't expect basically donkeys to run like race horses. And that's what's
like what is this, like puffing your chest out because you're bombing the poorest country in the world? Who is the only one standing up to the Israelis to try to stop the mass slaughter of women and children in Gaza? And you have these clowns in the US government that are carrying on like this is like some kind of a video game or a game of Risk. And basically that somehow in their mind, they have convinced themselves that the Houthis, Ansar Allah, are terrorists. And so they deserve to be, killed. Civilian casualties are collateral damage. And, and that's kind of where things are at. So it's just so arrogant, so out of touch with reality. And now they're transferring that arrogance onto the conversation with Iran, believing they have some kind of extra leverage because they have been bombing a country that's so below the poverty threshold. It's unbelievable, but that is resourceful enough that they have weapons they've developed, the Yemenis themselves, to defend themselves against their neighbors like Saudi Arabia. And the U.S. has been bombing Yemen for a decade through their proxies, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And there's no conversation in Washington about how the Yemenis might feel about that. Of course, they don't trust the U.S. They're not going to comply or listen. They're at war with the U.S. Okay, the U.S. started a war, and they don't want to finish it. And so, what do they expect? That Yemen's going to surrender after 10 years of taking a pounding with U.S. jets, U.S. bombs, U.S. satellites, U.S. intelligence, U.S. ground troops, proxies, which they subcontracted from Sudan? It's pathetic. The U.S. can't even put boots on the ground in Yemen. They're afraid to put boots on the ground because they know what's going to happen. It's going to be an absolute mayhem. And they're going to run with their tail between their legs after whatever period of time they're done, like every other boots on the ground situation the U.S. has gotten into. Off home with your tail between your legs. It never ends well. It can't end well because you're not supposed to be there anyway. And the delusion continues. Still, the thinking, it's like back to 2002 again. People are talking about Iran like they did Saddam. Let's just go in there and kick some ass, and we're going to turn that place into a glass crater, parking lot. We're going to turn the Iranians into a parking lot. That's the kind of rhetoric I'm hearing from people, unfortunately, from my U.S. colleagues. It's neoconservative, rebooted. It's like America has a gene, Freddie. It's like the war gene gets activated on the American DNA strand has this war gene. It's been activated, or the neocon gene. So it's, yeah. I mean, someone needs to be the adult in the room. It's not Trump. It's not Trump.
It's not Trump, that's for sure. I was looking for an article. There's a very good article about the capabilities, because this is really about capabilities. I'm not sure if I'm still here, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we've got you loud and clear, man.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm just trying to share with you an article. Actually, I posted it on the 21st Century Wire earlier today. It's an excellent article by Colonel Gary Anderson, and he explains really how much, the situations from a military point of view and a tactical point of view is actually quite dire, as far as the United States is concerned, because he explains that the doctrines and the military doctrines that has been in place for years now are really impacting the ability for Marines to actually deploy, a large amount of soldiers on the beach of Yemen and mind about Iran, but simply the lack of amphibious capabilities and the lack of capabilities to deploy large amount of troops makes it very absolutely impossible from a tactical point of view at this moment in time, as we speak, to launch a ground incursion, which is what is required. If you're going to take the launcher, if you're going to take the C2, you know, the control and command post, you need a ground incursions. And if you cannot deploy successfully, you don't have an invasion. You don't have a war. You don't have you can't win anything. You cannot control. You might inflict a lot of damage, you know, with airstrikes, you know, but a country like Yemen is, you know, half of the country is underground. So you're not going to win the war there. And it's probably going to be the same for Iran. So my conclusion to that is that all that we're hearing right now is a lot of noise. It's a lot of noise in order to somehow, it's a new techniques in terms of negotiations, to make a lot of noise and a lot of threats in order to get leverage. The problem is that not everyone buy this kind of negotiation tactics. Some people actually hate it, they don't like it, and they don't want to deal with you. And that's exactly what Iran did. They say, look, these are cheap brokers. We're not interested with dealing with cheap brokers. Go to Oman, speak with our people there. We'll see what you get to offer. We'll come up with something. But clearly, Iran is not scared. Clearly, Iran is undeterred. And right now, in 2018, it was Trump that got out of the GCPOA. It was not Iran. Right. So it doesn't matter what anybody else say, weapon inspectors or not. I think Iran has really tried its best, you know, to show that they were willing to play along, to play ball, to be part of the trusted partners in the international communities. But with another kids around the block like Israel, it's just simply impossible, because this double standards makes everything and everyone shaky in the region, and nobody feels comfortable with that. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and I think the solutions that you provided, Patrick, is excellent. And I think it's hopefully people will hear it and put that on Israel, because Trump needs something to offer. What is he going to put in the balance? He needs to put something on the table that is going to be basically the Iranians going to say, okay, we don't have to trust this guy, but if that can be endorsed by the international community, by the United Nations and the international agency, atomic energy agencies, then perhaps this is something worth exploring. But if it's not in the package, there's nothing in there for Iran, I'm afraid.
No, there's nothing there for the region either. You know, oh, we need to fight World War III, start a nuclear war in order to subdue Iran, in order to protect Israel so that it can ethnically cleanse the Palestinian population. That's kind of the basic plan. But that's the JCPOA that should be, which is all of the parties from the original JCPOA, okay, the P5+1, and Israel. And then the next job is to decide, should Israel have nukes or not? And if Israel has nukes, then Iran should have nukes, fair and square. But I think we know what the prudent move is going to be for both countries not to have nuclear weapons. They can have civilian nuclear programs, fine. But if both of them disarm, this will bring a lot more stability and trust in the region. And I think that's good for economics. It's good for international diplomacy. It's going to be good for stability. And it's going to start a conversation about dealing with Israel's basically broken UN resolutions regarding Palestine, regarding the occupation. That conversation can't happen. It's not happening because they're committing nuclear blackmail and extortion against the region and the world by having a secret nuclear arsenal, nuclear weapons arsenal. It is unacceptable. It needs to be dealt with. This is the perfect opportunity to raise this conversation. Even raising the conversation, I think, will potentially transform the discussion a lot. Whether Israel complies or not, I don't expect them to want to comply with anything. But this conversation needs to happen, because we're not dealing with a full picture by allowing one country to keep 200 to 300 warheads. And plus all the other weapons that you said, Freddie, the other ones, more. Okay. So this isn't acceptable for any nation, let alone one that's in the dock in the international court for genocide.
It's insane. It's insane.
The one country you don't want to have nukes has them undeclared and exempt from any inspections. That should be unacceptable for everybody.
Yeah, it is. Look, none of, we all want to live in a world there's no nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, history has proven to be right in terms of, when they were there, when they were developed, at the beginning of the 20th century. Then clearly we saw what it brought to the world. And as far as Russia and the United States, somehow it works. It has worked. There's not been any real aggressions, although NATO has, with its expansion strategy, has trying to do something and trying to say, well, we're not really there, but we kind of there as well. And as soon as they've just tried a little bit, 1 million people died in Ukraine for no reason whatsoever. Yep. For no reason. That's just the cost for someone bad idea.
Right. Well, Iran should be looking at that, Freddie, and saying, UN Security Council Resolution 2202, 2015, Minsk Accords. The US, China, Russia, everyone, unanimous vote. The only time they ever agreed on anything to implement the Minsk Accords. In the US, the French and the Germans undermined it, sabotaged it. So the Iranians are looking at that and thinking, what happened? A war happened. That's brought the world to the brink of World War III. And whose fault is it? United States, France, Britain, Germany. And so why would Iran want to do a deal? Again, another reason why Iran doesn't trust the US as far as they could throw them. There's too many reasons not to trust the US. So somebody has to make a move that's going to show good faith. And I think that is Israel must declare their nuclear arsenal, and we must start the process of non-proliferation well and truly in the region. And that this is the only solution to this stalemate. Otherwise we're going to get war.
It's a prerequisite. As far as I'm concerned right now, there's no options as far as disarming both countries right now, especially within the context and the geopolitical context of the moment. Let me ask you a question, Patrick. If Russia didn't have the nuclear capabilities that they do have, what would have happened in Ukraine? We saw that with even having this form of deterrence, there was incursion on the Russian Federation territory in Kursk. That's attacking, literally invading a nation that has nuclear weapon. You know how much maturity and control you need to have at the leadership level to not basically blow, Ukraine to kingdom come.
Yeah.
And yet the Russians have restrained themselves from doing it. When they could destroy it in no time. They could have done it, but they're not interested. They're not after the people of Ukraine. They're after a regime that is rogue. And I think the Iranians have exactly the same thing. They're like, we want to be in a position right now within this context that there is a rogue state at our border, literally. And we want to make sure that these guys not going to venture in our country without paying the price for it. Doesn't matter if they bring their friend, the United States, along the promenade. They're going to have to feel it. And that's exactly what the Iranians, I think, are doing, unless they can say, look, we call it a day, but on the agreement, Israel has to open the gates and let everyone find out what they've been hiding from the rest of the world for more than 70 years.
The answer to your question, Freddie, is what would happen if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons? And we're seeing this NATO expansion. I'll tell you, the answer is World War II. It's Operation Barbarossa and Operation Bagration. That's the answer. A total scorched earth, millions of people dead, and Russia winning in the end, but at a huge cost to lives, treasure, and so forth. We already had that game. It's called Second World War. And then we put in the United Nations and all these different treaties to avoid that, like preventing genocide, for instance. And, Germany is defending Israel. The ultimate historic irony, defending Israel's right to kill and ethnically cleanse the native Palestinian population in order for Israel to create Lebensraum, living space. The historic irony of this, it shows you, if Germany is the apex of continental Europe, then and continental Europe is the apex of Western civilization, then I will say this proves a failure of Western civilization. It has utterly failed. And the Chinese and the Asians are looking at this basket case, bunch of insane lunatics in Europe and America, and thinking, what is wrong with these people? What problem have they got? It just has to be constant death and destruction. They just can't live a day without starting a new war or subjugating some neo-colonial target nation. They just can't. They're literally beyond reform. That it may not be totally true. Obviously, there's a lot of sane people in the West, but that's kind of the general viewpoint of the global South, looking at Europe and the United States, and their attitude is just so corrupt. And Israel is the ultimate embodiment. It's like the dragon child of, of the worst parts of Europe, and European history has spawned this disaster in the Middle East that is determined to drag the region and the world into a third world war for let's not get into the prophecies and the end times crazy fanatical eschatological stuff. Let's just not get into that. Okay, let's just keep it on a political, geopolitical discussion here. It's insane. It's insane. How is that? How's that good for the standard of living, the happiness index, allowing humans to thrive and to advance and to work together? All of these things are basically being undermined by a couple of countries: Washington, United States, Israel, and the other leading NATO countries, Britain, France, Germany. It's the Western powers basically, and Israel are undermining every potential solution to all of these problems. They cannot let go of their colonial legacy. They just can't. Just clinging on to it for dear life. Just desperate. Like it's. Oh my gosh! I pray every day that some sanity will emerge and come, the depths of this situation, that something is going to like a light.
So what about you? What about Europe? What about Europe and their tendency to keep this war in Ukraine? It's become personal. I think you've got Stalmer, you got Macron, you got now Merz, which is not going to be any better. It's already confirmed that he's going to spend more money on Ukraine. Macron is so upset about the loss of power in Sahel, in Africa, that he's like, he wants to get back at Putin and teach him anything. The problem is that we don't have the army to do that. We're not prepared. We don't have such a thing as a European army. It does not exist. And in order to bring up what they encapsulate as an idea of a European army, it'll take 10 years. So unless you're going to spend 10 years, 5 at least, to integrate new technology, because obviously you need to build new technology and the latest armaments. And then on the other side, to integrate it in a very fluid fashion across the various corps. This is 10 years. If everything goes according to plan. So there's no war. All that is just a noise. No one's going to dispatch. If you're going to dispatch French troops or British troops in Ukraine, it doesn't matter if you call them, peacekeepers or whatever you want to call them. These people are going to be target practice. Simple as that. And there's nothing in there, because before even doing that, there should be a referendum in each of the countries, in Germany, in France, in Holland as well, and in the UK. Let's have a referendum. If you are legitimate, if you have, and you say that, our people are behind us and they support us in that, well, let's put a referendum. Let's put a referendum and ask the people what they think. And I can tell you, they're going to be very surprised by the result, because I just simply don't hear it, apart from the same usual suspect. But in the masses, on the street, when I go to the market, when I go and buy my bread, the conversations, this is where you get the news.
People are noticing, Freddie. They're noticing. The great noticing is taking place. The great noticing. And this is why they're panicking. This is why the elites are, taking their opposition and arresting them and creating fake scandals and canceling elections and, keeping the war going, because the people are noticing. And this scares the hell out of these self-appointed rightful rulers of their technocratic planetary fiefdom. So, I mean, look, I want to talk about French politics in the next available opportunity, because there's a lot going on there, obviously, Freddie. But look, we're going to leave it here on this, because I think we gave this a fair dues, this topic today. Important discussion. I think appreciate your contribution on this, and also people follow Freddie Ponton. I'll put his X handle up on screen. That's at Freddie_Ponton. There's also a link on the X live stream. You just hit that. That's Freddie's account. Follow Freddie. Very good quality analysis. Plus, he's also posting some great reports up at 21stcenturywire.com, building up very, very strong archives, especially on Israel's secret nuclear weapons program. We have right now accumulating one of the best archives on the independent media on this particular topic. So we're going to continue to build on this. By the way, this is an archive that's just beginning to take shape. So again, Freddie Ponton, thank you for joining us on this midweek wire. Hope to see you soon.
You bet.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Freddie Ponton. Look, that's all we've got time for today. Went a little bit over time on the live stream for this midweek wire, but obviously this is a really important topic. Sunday is the Sunday wire. Now, we're back to our normal scheduled time because of the daylight savings issue. Transatlantic has been ironed out, as it is this time of year, but we'll see. We're on the road this weekend, so I'm not sure what the schedule is going to be like and how we're going to manage that. So we'll see. We may have a guest host for that. We'll see. If we do, it'll be my normal team. Plus, I will participate in that broadcast. I just won't be hosting it, but I'll be coming on the fly as a guest with our amazing team. So it'll be a great discussion. Of course, that's Sunday, 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. UK time. That's 12 till 3 Eastern Standard if you're in the United States of America. Listen, appreciate you guys joining us. This has been, again, another important conversation which we're having on this platform. The Midweek Wire, new program, to a sister program with the Sunday Wire. I think this was our 10th episode of the Midweek Wire. So we've been going for a couple of months now. Very excited about that and appreciate your support. Wouldn't have been able to do it without the support of our listeners, our viewers as well. So if you like what we're doing and you want to see us do more, I've got another program we're trying to put together, as well as our new upgraded member suite. So subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. Just go to the link on my X profile, click on support donate. That'll take you to our website here. And we just did a winter fundraising drive where a lot of you donated. And we're going to need your help going forward. Obviously, we're expanding a little bit, so we want to build out a few more features that are going to help you be more informed, basically, and produce better reports, more reports, better content, and additional show to the 2 weekly shows we have. I want to put a third informal program in there as well. So, again, working on production of these things as we go, plus upgrading this broadcast suite that we're using at the moment, which we're happy with, but we need to do some improvements on a number of things. Plus, 21wire.tv has a whole bunch of things that we're planning and working on in the background. If you've logged in, you might have seen some of them, but there's a lot more. It's about 10% finished. There's about 90% to go. We're going to need your help to make that happen. Listen, that's all we've got time for. That's it. That's the show, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host, and this has been another edition of the Midweek Wire. Keep an eye on our X feed. There's a lot of things coming, and we'll be checking up with you over the weekend. So take care. Hope you have a great week. All the best.